last video, we started to tell you the story about this building here, and we never finished. We got sidetracked a little bit regarding Albert Parfait's first job as an English teacher for Ford Motor Company. In 1921, Ford Motor Company gave Mr. Parfait a Ford dealership, and he moved to Port Huron and opened that dealership on the 400 block of Water Street. This is a typical Ford ad that Ford ran for his dealerships, and you can see the Albert Parfait Company quite prominently down below. You can also see this little delivery truck down below, tootling down the road, and on the side of it has Shuck Brothers. And Shuck Brothers was a store that sold groceries and meat, and they were located over on Wall Street, and obviously a proud owner of a new Ford delivery truck. In the roaring 20s, the car industry took off, and of course Parfait, being the businessman he was, wanted a bigger location, and that's when he decided to build on the corner of White and Military Street. Albert Parfait Company to erect a $125,000 building. Keep in mind, this was a pretty big deal back then. $125,000, I mean, that would cost over $1 million today to build. On December 9th, 1921, Parfait's dealership opened. And an open house was held for anyone that wanted to go through and look at the new dealership. The night after his grand opening, Parfait held a charity dance at his dealership. All proceeds would go to the Oklawana Crippled Children's Camp. The Oklawana Crippled Children's Camp was a local affair. It was actually sponsored by the citizens of Port Huron. It was located on Lake Huron. As this article says, the Oklawana Camp for Crippled Children is the realest reality that has ever happened to spread sunshine over the lives of Port Huron's crippled small folks. It goes on to say basically how they were meeting on the beach and the weather got cold and they didn't have any protection. And they were asking the citizens of Port Huron, along with the local government, to help sponsor them. And so they did. The folks took part, the Rotary Club got involved, and of course Parfait got involved with this dance. The dollar admission that folks paid at the door would be put to good use. It helped build a fine building, completely equipped with electric light, gas, ample bedding, a piano, phonograph, kitchen, and all the playground equipment that could be desired. And later on, a furnace was donated to make it year-round. I'm sure during the dance, the new 1922 Fords were made available for viewing, and folks could look at them, and I'm sure there was a couple of salesmen wandering around with their order pads just in case somebody wanted to buy one. It's a little difficult to make out, but as you can see there's on the left-hand side, there's glass partition, and this, of course, would separate the manager's office and the sales managers, the cashier, the telephone exchange, from the rest of the sales floor. And this photo here looks very much like a parts counter. I'm not sure, it's not designated as such, but it certainly looks like one. The service department was actually on the second floor of this building. And I think that's the reason there are so many windows on the second floor as well as the first. That would give the mechanics as much light as possible to work by, because back in the 1920s the lighting wasn't all that great. The cars were able to access the second floor with the help of this lift, a type of an elevator that they use to get the cars from the ground floor to the second floor. The basement was also utilized in displaying Ford trucks. Here we see one, but this isn't how it would have been shipped. Prior to 1924, the Ford trucks were shipped without bodies. Ford used independent companies to make the bodies, and Parfait may have even used companies locally to make the bodies, I don't know. But anyway, the customer would order the type of body he wanted, such as this delivery truck that was quite popular. It could have been this one, or it could have been a heavy-duty truck like this. And when Ford didn't make a big enough truck, the customer just had to improvise. And of course, there's always the police paddy wagon. Starting in 1925, Ford made their own bodies, and here we see the Ford's first pickup, quite a popular model then. Albert Parfait went on to sponsor the first Auto Dealer Association in Port Huron. First radio broadcast from Port Huron came during this auto show that was organized by John Kaywood, Al Parfait, Elmer Brown, Bert Hyde, Herbert Wheel, and Mayor John French. It was in March of 1922 when WMX received authority to broadcast temporarily from the auto show. This would have been the first radio station in Port Huron. The second station came, it's only a 50-watt station, but it was broadcast for the first time in January 1924 and is operated by a local musician, J. Irving Bell. The station apparently stayed on the air for less than a year. Albert Parfait started his own radio station broadcasting from the Parfait building in February of 1925 with the call letters WAFD, which stood for We Are Ford Dealers. Bell apparently helped put WAFD on the air. 1927 City Directory lists Parfait as the station's owner and Bell as the manager of the WAFD radio shop, which sold radios and related equipment from a storefront at the Parfait building. WAFD was off the air by the start of the Depression in 1929. The Great Depression would have other challenges for Albert Parfait and his dealership, mainly to have enough business to keep afloat. In order to add to his bottom line, Parfait started to sell used cars, becoming the first used car lot in Port Huron. The sale of the used cars helped, but it just didn't help enough. In January of 1933, Parfait would lose this building. I don't believe Parfait ever thought about going out of the dealership business. I think while he was looking for a new location, he opened up a gas station on the corner of 10th and Water Street, right near the 10th Street Bridge. And it did quite well. And then he found another location for his dealership right across from the old Desmond Theater, or later on the Huron Theater. And so, just a few months after he left the other building, in August of 1933, this announcement appeared saying that he was going to go into the new Albert Parfait Ford Lincoln dealership. And this is a little sketch of about where it was. You recall from previous videos, right next door would have been the Yoakum car dealership. Yoakum sold the GM products, Buick, Pontiac, and Cadillac, and also the LaSalle. And so I'm sure there was some friendly competition in that block. By 1936, Parfait bought another high-speed gas station right across the street from where he was located and right next to the Desmond Theater, as well as moving his new showroom right next to the gas station. This whole complex would have been between the Desmond Theater and the Harrington Hotel. My father shot this 8mm movie in 1942 of downtown Port Huron, and he captured this complex that we've just been talking about. This was the showroom area right here. And it pans over to the gas station side. And this is the high-speed gas station we were talking about earlier. 1942 was no longer a Ford Lincoln dealership. It was a Chrysler Plymouth dealership. But it gives you a good idea what it looked like. In 1946, Parfait was back in this building 13 years after leaving it, and was now selling Ford products with his son-in-law, Sanford Ladd. The company now went by the name Parfait Ladd Company, selling the Ford products. And as you can see out front here, they got a nice big order from City Cab, all brand new Fords. I didn't think I had a picture of the bomb shelter bowling alley, but here it is right on the other side of those Fords. A building with the sign on the side of it. Not a real good picture, but it is the bomb shelter. Also notice the sign just to the left of the Ford sign. It's Erd Marshall. This was a clothing manufacturer, and they made hats, they made coats, they made ladies' dresses, children's, and the quality of the clothes was just excellent. They were located on the second floor. They were in business a long time. Originally, they were in the 300 block of Huron Avenue. And then they had moved to the 500 block of Huron Avenue, and then they moved here on Military Street. The Erd Marshall Company was owned by a woman, which was pretty unusual back here in 1924, which is when this directory was published. We could see from this that originally it was called the Marshall Tot Shop. And Erd Marshall made their name in children's clothes, but later went on to produce women's as well. She had patents on many of her designs to make sure they weren't copied improperly. Here we see a hooded garment that was made for a small child. And this one here is a unique design. I'm not quite sure what it is. I know it is described as a carriage cloak for a child. It was a type of a wrap robe which could easily be converted into a sleeveless coat. In this directory from 1946, you can see that they got the whole family involved. She was still the president, but Harry was the vice president, and Jane was the secretary, and John was the treasurer. And you can see here they were manufacturing misses in children's suits and clothing and so forth. Erd Marshall was very involved in community affairs. When they had Edison Days, they made many of the costumes for the people that dressed up specially in that period of clothing. Granger Will, who was the publisher of the Times Herald and also the head of the Edison Day program, sent them a letter thanking them for all their help in making these costumes. And this is the response that Jane Erd Marshall sent back to Will. Dear Grange, it was kind of you to write Mother and myself regarding our humble efforts on the costume work. In spite of the nightmare of the week preceding the Edison celebration, everybody seemed happy when the big day finally arrived. I'm writing you this letter just to let you know that we appreciate what a grand job you did as General Chairman. Once again, thank you for that nice letter. Sincerely, Jane Erd Marshall. Albert Parfait retired in 1953. When Parfait first came to Port Huron, he was selling these vehicles. And when he left his retirement in Port Huron, he was selling these vehicles. Quite a transformation in sales product, and quite a legacy for a successful businessman in Port Huron. Later on, Port Pontiac would take over the building, and of course they sold Pontiacs, but they also sold a British vehicle called the Vauxhall. This was a subsidiary of GM. It was very, very popular in Britain, but not very popular in the States. Probably nobody even remembers it. I know I didn't. At some point, Albert Parfait moved to Santa Monica, California, where he passed away at the age of 83. Most folks that are in my age bracket remember the DHA Grocery Stores. They seem to be every place in Port Huron, and at one time they had over a dozen of them. Well, this building was converted to a warehouse as a central stocking point for these stores. It's called the Warehouse Food Market, and they also sold retail over there as well. But their main purpose was to have the space to stock those other stores with. This would have been in the late 30s, early 40s. In the early 1960s, it was the bus station for the Greyhound bus line. In 1985, Five Seasons Factory Outlet took over the store, and this was a wonderful store. I've got over 12 Christmas mangers that we display at Christmas time, and the prettiest one I ever bought was at Five Seasons. They lasted until about 1993, and they went out of business, and I hated to see them go. It's funny how we can just drive by a building and not realize what kind of history that building has, don't think about it much. This building has had quite a history. I have one more photograph I'd like to show you. It's right alongside of the building on White Street. You can see what it looks like now, but here's what it looks like when they were paving it. Shows a work crew out there working on the street. It doesn't look very wide at all. And this must have been taken during the time Parfait was there. You can see the Ford sign on the building. But notice across the street, that Victorian home. What a beautiful home I imagine that was. In our next video, we'll mosey over to the next block, the 1500 block of military, and see what there is to see there.